So welcome back. Today is going to be another, open debugging day. So on Wednesday, you had asked, if you put together figures or make further attempts to put together figures, or then, we can go over those and debug them, or, if you're stuck on stuff, we can look at that. So, I'm happy to use this course period, however would be most helpful to all of you. So,
I have another map question. I know we were doing some stuff on Wednesday. So I don't know, like if it would be helpful for me to like share my screen or. Cool.
Sure. Yeah. Let's try it.
Okay. So I was able to get, nice. I was able to get a couple maps up, and these two are working exactly how I want them. They're on like a sliding scale, sort of based on like cases and vaccines, but I'm still having trouble with my income one because I'm having issues with like converting the income from string to integer. And
Okay.
we've tried like a couple of different ways and it seems like it should be working, but it still like won't register this as like a scale of income versus just a bunch of strings. So it's just putting all these random colors.
Okay. Should we try to debug that?
Yeah, that would be great. I can show you like a couple of different ways we tried to change it. Isha and I were on a call earlier trying to fix it, but like, sure. So when we do some data wrangling, we tried to do this where we just like did the as type thing. That worked for the other two columns that we wanted, but it didn't work for this one. So then later, I tried to use your.
Did it give you an error there, or?
No, it just like didn't do it or something. I don't really know why it's still not working. So then I tried your like safe convert thing that you had, and I like edited it a little bit so there'd be no commas and stuff. And so then I was like, maybe the commas were the issue, but this still doesn't. I don't really understand, because then when I try to like just do the type of just like any random row, it's showing me int, but then in the graph it's still not working.
Okay.
So I don't really know.
Do you mind if I control your screen?
No, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, okay, so it's this column per capita income in rupees.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Okay, that looks great. Okay, and then let's see what the values here are. Ooh. Okay, so D type equals object is interesting. It's not what I expected. So we could look at the type of each of these things. A bunch of ints. Interesting. That looks good. So what's going on? Yeah, mysterious. Let's see. Let's see. I mean, I don't think we're dealing with like a overflow issue, but oops. Let's see, how do I do this? Yeah, these are all way less than that. Okay.
I don't know if it's like the map itself, but it's strange to me that it worked for the other two variables.
Yeah.
The other two
Just-
variables, sorry, were like things I created, like based off of other columns. So I don't know if that has something to do with it.
Yeah, that's true, because you calculated like per 100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Let's see. So, oh, we could try. Does this run relatively quickly?
Yeah, much quicker than it did last time.
Okay. I'm just gonna. Do you mind if I just rerun this then? I'll
Yeah, no,
see
go
if
for it.
this. See if this works. Just wondering if it's some sort of weird like slice thing. I don't think so. But,
Yeah, it runs faster now for whatever reason.
okay. Yeah. No, that looks the same. Okay. So that's not it. Okay. So. Let's see. Maybe there's like a force. Okay, chloroglyph map box. Well, it works for all, but it works for all your other ones, right?
Yeah, so those are right below. I just copy pasted it and changed where the data was coming from, so I don't know what would be different other than the data, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, just for the sake of completeness, let's see. So COVID, let's see what this looks like. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. And then, oops. Interesting. So these are int 64s. Whereas the income is just objects. So when you could oh, where did you do your oh, okay. Ah, okay. 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 I'm gonna comment this stuff out. You could say actually.
Oh, also, that's the wrong data frame. That's not the one that I had changed previously, or what we were using
one?
in the, yeah, weren't you using the COVID one in the maps? Or were you
I'm
still
using
using
the
the income one?
I was using the COVID one for the cases and vaccine maps, but
Okay.
this was a problem I was having before, so I don't know
Yeah.
if the population would impact it at all.
Okay, well, we can just, yeah, so this will convert things to ints, and then I think this will work.
Okay.
We'll see though.
That looks promising that now it's saying that instead of object.
Yeah. Okay. Oops. Gotta scroll it just the right part.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. There we go.
Yay. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. So now I'm forgetting how you converted it before, but you just had the safe convert. I usually use apply. I don't know.
Okay.
So apply just applies a function to each element, but the function here is just int, which is a data type. But if you apply, so if you like say int of 7 or something, or that's not a 7, int of whatever, it'll convert it to an integer. And then it also works on strings and what have you.
Awesome.
So you can treat it like a function. Okay, it's just of type, but types can be treated as functions because when you apply them to other Python objects, it tries to convert them into that type.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's all I have on like the maps front. I think our group was generally just wondering like sort of if there are any other visualizations that you can think of, because we have a couple of scatter plots further up. And Isha and I were talking about, she was saying she could do like a bar graph of like the top 10 states for like income and vaccinations and all that stuff, which could be interesting. But we had wanted to do like a violin plot, but there's not really data on like the distribution for like income or I mean mostly income we were curious about. But
got it.
Yeah.
Have you tried doing any like animations? Like do you have, I don't know if you have breakdowns by date, but that could be interesting.
I think we do. Isha, did you like isolate certain days when you were dealing with the data, or how did you do that?
Yeah, so the vaccine data is over time, and I had a data set in there where it was testing over time, but it wasn't like, there's a lot of missing values, so I switched it, but I can always just like use that other one to do an overtime graph.
Cool. Yeah. So if you just, it's really easy to make animations in Plotly. So if you just set the animation frame argument, so you do like animation frame equals, and then if this is like, you know, date or something like this, then that'll make an animation for you where date is the like determines the frame number in the animation.
Yeah, that could be cool to do for cases to see like where they were at certain times or how many.
So I'll comment that out so it doesn't break your
Yeah,
code.
perfect.
In Plotly, is there like an easy way to do like facets of a graph?
Yeah, so I think it
I
might
did
be
a
maybe
faceted
even
one.
it might even just be called facets. Let's see. Let's see. Does anyone see facet as one of these?
Oh, sorry. It's like facet underscore call or facet underscore row, depending if you want to facet by column or row.
Oh.
Maybe the maps can't do it. I don't know.
Interesting. Maybe. Let's see. We could Google that. Plotly Express choropleth map facet. Yeah, no, there's apparently Oh, I don't know about Mapbox, but the regular choropleth map can do facet row and column. Interesting. So it looks like, yeah, facet underscore row could be like a name of a column in a data frame, and then facet underscore column could be a name of a column in a data frame, and then it'll like group it'll summarize like when the column is both given by the row, or sorry, when the column of the data frame is given by the columns row and the rows, sorry, the columns column and the rows column, it'll make, one of those maps for each combination of those features. That sounds kind of cool. And then it looks like there's this argument facet call wrap. I can paste this in so you all have the, I'll see what I'm looking at. And that'll tell you like the maximum number of columns to have in your plot. Like in case you want to not have a million rows and columns. Yeah, that could be interesting. The other thing you could do is like if you, even if you can't do it if let's say choropleth map boxes don't have, like you can't do faceted plots, you could just paste, make the plots for each, panel that you wanted and then paste them into some other program. Like, you could even go in a Keynote slide. That's totally fine. And then you could do like, if you wanted them to be animated, you could do like a screen recording and just, like you can hack it together. So.
Yeah, we were talking about like how we would kind of display the different maps for the like actual story video, and we probably wanted them side by side. So that's good to know.
Cool.
I don't think I have any other questions. Isha or anybody? Is Laya here? I think so.
Oh yeah. Might be having Wi-Fi issues. Oh yeah. Okay. She said, "Sounds good to me."
Oh, cool. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I can stop the share then if the other group has any questions.
Yeah, that would be great. Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. I have to open it up. Okay. Okay, so just was more looking at like, if you think our plot is fine / like anything else that might be interesting, do you think that we're presenting it in a good way? So basically, we realized that there were a lot of daily fluctuations that just made it like the data hard to interpret, like going back up. It's like, well, what does this really mean? And so ended up grouping by week.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, blah, 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 then grouping. And so now it's like new cases per 100,000 per week. And we focus on Grafton County and the 3 like immediately touching counties. So Sullivan and then Orange and Windsor. And it's actually really interesting. So I don't feel like the stacked bar plot is the best way to do it. But that's, I guess, something I'll ask advice on, because when we like dodge the position, it just is like very overwhelming. But looking at like a line chart, this kind of separated them out a little bit, but I guess this is together. But either way, we're seeing that. So I have to figure out how to like map the week back to like, I guess I can make a dictionary or something so that it would say like February, whatever, but I added a little label. So this is when the Dartmouth outbreak occurred. and actually see there's like a decrease in weekly average cases, and this upcrease isn't until over 6 weeks later. So it's like very unlikely that that has anything.
So that's really interesting. So
Really,
the week before it, do you know what that, because that's like a peak in Grafton County. So like, could
Yeah.
it be that the community transmitted to Dartmouth? Like, is that what?
that could be one caveat is that I did see something somewhere saying that there were like they caught up on some backlog around February 17th or something, which
Of
lines
tests or?
yeah, but it's so it's probably not actually that high on that given day, but like none of the other ones had a peak like that, and it wasn't like they said it was Grafton specific. So it is interesting, but there was, I mean, a lot of cases in Sullivan.
Yeah.
That to hear is also like 6 weeks. But this was like really, really, really interesting how there's actually like a pretty marked decrease in cases. I mean, that might be because like we quarantined pretty well, like the quarantine numbers were a lot higher and people might have been more cautious, but like that was pretty cool for like each county decrease.
Yeah.
And looking here, it's like, yeah, those next few weeks were overall with all the counties lower, and each individual one, which we see here, is kind of lower. Or at least not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting.
And it's
Cool. Yeah. That's
1,000
neat.
per week. From starting.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly there's no like, there's nothing jumping out that's like, oh yeah, everything else is peaking 2 weeks after, or like, 1 to 2 weeks after the Dartmouth cases are peaking. So I think, yeah, like what jumps out to me is like the peak didn't occur in Grafton County, didn't occur at the same time as the Dartmouth peak. And also it was, it's like, if it occurred a week after, that could be like, okay, maybe Dartmouth is spreading to the county as a whole. But since it's before, that's like that to me is pretty compelling. So
Yeah,
that's like, you can't go back in time with, causal, if A is causing B, then, B can't occur before A without a time machine. And, we could assume that, yeah. And then, and then there's clearly no peak in the other surrounding communities, 1, 2, or 3 weeks after. So yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was really cool once grouping into week, because daily it was hard to see because they fluctuate a lot. So first of all, I guess, do you have any advice on how to present a bar chart? Like for this, I thought like facets were an easier way to pull out so you can see each county's kind of trajectory. But then
I liked how everything is overlaid, because I think that makes it really easy to just compare.
Yeah, well, and it's cool to see like the cumulative altogether, because you miss that with the line graph, but here it's like each individual county you can see is like lower from here, but then like even like also then like collectively they're also lower.
Yeah.
But I know that sometimes these can be hard to interpret, but I don't know if maybe doing the line graph kind of makes up for that, because then you do get to see like the individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a nice way of, I like this way of visualizing. I think it's nice. Yeah, I could see like a grouped bar plot as being a little overwhelming. Yeah, and it's the same information as in the line plot if you just had a grouped plot anyway. It's just that the line plot's like a more kind of natural way of visualizing it. So I think this is nice. so this shows like the summary overall. So, you know, after the Dartmouth outbreak, I mean, I think it's really hard. If it was like, you know, the cases were flat, that would be inconclusive. If the cases were increasing slightly, that, you know, would be suggestive, but maybe inconclusive. If there was a huge spike, that would be pretty concerning. Considering cases drop off after the outbreak, I think that's like, you know, it's hard to conclude from this that the Dartmouth outbreak is driving community spread in Grafton or the surrounding communities. So I think that's
Yeah.
Seems
Yeah,
like a pretty
yeah,
nice
it's the
result.
kind of thing
Yeah.
where it's not like it's proving like, oh, Dartmouth had nothing to do with it, because obviously there's still cases, but it's just showing like we at least see that there was not a spike that is attached to this. And so that it's almost like a null hypothesis type of thing. Like there's no support here that Dartmouth caused a peak.
Yeah, I mean, so one way of presenting it would be to like, you could kind of dramatize the results by saying like, you know, suppose Dartmouth was driving community spread, like what sorts of things might you expect to see? And so like, you know, it's challenging to track this thing because it's like, you know, if person A infects person B, you don't see evidence of that. I mean, you may not see evidence of that ever, because like if symptoms are mild, person B might not know they're infected. But then even if person B like has symptoms, sorry, Nathan, I see your hand, just one sec. Then their symptoms aren't necessarily going to show up for like, you know, 10 to 14 days. And so there's like a lag between everything. So everything is kind of complicated in that way. But you could say like, you know, let's say the minimum possible amount of time is like 0 days. And then the maximum possible like amount of time is like 3 weeks. So that would be like, you know, super generous margins. And you could say like,
Which is actually kind of at their lowest is 3 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. So then you could say like, okay, well, then you'd expect to see a spike in Grafton or the surrounding counties, you know, somewhere in 0 to 3 weeks after the Dartmouth outbreak. And then what do you actually see? And then, you know, and then, yeah, so what can we conclude from this? Like, well, it doesn't look like there's much evidence for Dartmouth spreading to the community. So that's great. Yeah.
Do you think there's anything like glaring that like we're missing that would, I mean, I can't really think of another piece to the story. Just because the Dartmouth data doesn't really, it's not as credible. Even going in the Wayback Machine, there wasn't like a consistency, and it would only really be for like these weeks. So it would be tough. So just figuring like, we're kind of like, here's when we know there was a spike. There were a lot of cases here, but then like, we're really more interested in what happened to the communities around us. Oops.
So that week was when we got the like campus email about it, like when we went above 1%. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what the heck I just did.
Sorry, Nathan, did you have something you wanted to? You can just unmute yourself also. But I mean, you're welcome to raise your hand. But
yeah, I just want to let you finish. You guys finish what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But wait, I'm not sure if you mentioned, Amelia, but we were also thinking of doing like a sentiment analysis to discuss kind of like how this how like the assumptions has like possibly made Dartmouth students feel, like if like think like maybe like they might feel like upset or confused, or maybe thinking it's unfair, or maybe like also like we'll find out that they think it's that we should be held accountable for that stuff. But like, so we're thinking of like doing like a survey to pass around to people, and maybe trying to gather some more information and that might also like work well with the fact that our data isn't like perfect per se, because it just poses like more interesting things like that happen from like the assumptions, being made.
I think some sort of a sentiment analysis sounds it sounds interesting. A survey, you could do a survey. I think you could also do like scraping comments on Twitter or off Twitter or something like that. You might get a broader sampling there, but also potentially noisier. So, but
I was trying. I wanted to look at Librex because Librex is one of the things I think it's just like a place where Dartmouth students can anonymously like post stuff. And the only problem there is you can't really like sort it by date. So I just would have to keep scrolling, and like it doesn't even say like what the date is. It only says like 5 months ago. So
I see.
I don't know if that would be that feasible.
Do you have like, are there any stats of like how even just like on like put out by Librex, like rough number of posts per day or per week or something, so that you could really roughly approximate?
I could look into that. I'm not sure.
The other thing you could do is say, if you have like, let's say you have like 100,000 messages, if you have access to like 100,000 messages, you could just say like, looking, it could be 1 million. I don't know what the right scale is. It could be 10,000, could be 1 million. You could say, you could try to say like, what are people talking about? And then you could try to do some sort of basic filtering of like COVID related discussions. So you could say like, coronavirus was mentioned within some number of, comments of a given comment. And then, you could look for the most common keywords that are mentioned around that time. Like, you could literally just count word occurrences.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, I'll try like exploring that a little bit more. And I guess like if that doesn't work out, I think the survey could be interesting too. But yeah, that sounds good.
Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point of the survey is to like put some numbers to like the sentiment within students that like this is unfair and it's like kind of hurtful, and like feeling like we don't belong or like we're unwanted is hurtful. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah.
If you did a survey, you wouldn't even have to do sentiment analysis though. Like you could just ask people to rate their feelings, and that could be like way easier to analyze.
I think that's what we were doing. I don't know, maybe like I just thought that was a sentiment analysis. Is that something different?
Oh.
Yeah,
sentiment
it's different.
Okay.
Yeah, a sentiment analysis is like it's like an analysis of the words. So like, people using the words like happy or great or like special, those would be positive affiliated words versus like terrible, awful, sad, those would be negative words. And then sentiment analysis, well, you can do this in different ways, but you can either just count up the proportions of positive and negative words, or you can, sometimes some versions of this assign a valence to words. So like great is more positive than good, etc. And then, compute the average positive or negative valence across your words or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So the text blob Python package does sentiment analysis, and then a few of the previous projects for this course have done sentiment analyses. Let's see if I some of these are probably broken, but maybe it's just easiest to, yeah, so here's the documentation for that package. It's really easy to, it's just like a couple lines to take a bunch of text and run it through their sentiment analysis function.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Another idea would be to, like if there's if you find like an op-ed, either like it could be in the Dartmouth or, you know, even like, you know, more mainstream newspapers like the New York Times or Washington Post, LA Times, like, you know, some, really any newspaper, if you could find examples of like, okay, maybe there's a college, you know, college students or a group of college students who's written about this, and you and you could get like, okay, here's a representative example. And then you could also, you know, take a look at like community member, like non-college student community members in college towns. Like what have they said about students returning to campus? And maybe you can like use that as a, you know, tensions are high sort of framing of the story. And then, you know, dig into it like, okay, what's like, you know, here are the assumptions on, you know, from both, you know, sides of this issue, and then what does the, you know, if we actually look at the data, like what do we find, and where's the support for one argument or for the other, or is this an ambiguous scenario, and like what do you think, you know, what does this mean moving forward? Are there further implications beyond COVID? Are there, you know, where do these assumptions come from? Like, you know, based on maybe historical behaviors or stereotypes. I think there's a lot of interest. There are a lot of interesting directions that you could go in, I think. There's another like I read it. Now I'm forgetting the source, but I was reading. I might have been about like some politician, but like it's like, you know, the accusing people of like misbehaving often means you're the kind of like you did the thing that you're accusing someone else of. And so I wonder if there's like a way to bring, you know, there could be an interesting way to bring that in, like, you know, community members accusing college students of bad behavior. Maybe they behaved badly in college, and so they are like projecting. You know, that could be, I don't know if there'd be data to support that, but it could be an interesting take.
No, that's definitely an interesting take. I think it would be maybe difficult to prove, but it would be an interesting way of looking at it.
I mean, I think like it's tricky. Like I mean, I don't know how, you know, like when the in the 1920s with the like flu outbreak, like the flu pandemic, I'm guessing college students were affected then too, but like, you know, I don't know, like I haven't done any research into what that was like, but really for like, I mean, certainly in my lifetime, like there's never been something like this. So it's kind of unfair. And like, even in like 1 or 2 generations ago, like there's really nothing like this. And so to compare what it's like, it's hard to make statements about like, okay, what are college students today going through and how does that relate to what I experienced in college? It's different, like you're dealing with different challenges. And like to draw parallels is really tricky and often like based on, assumptions that are not borne out by data. So that could be an interesting take too. Like, even if college students in general historically behaved in a particular way, like you're not in a typical situation. So, how does that affect things? I mean, even your, the like mental calculations that you're all doing when you're deciding how to interact with your peers at college is so much different than how other generations of college students have thought about social interaction. And like, there's this kind of ever-present pandemic, like coloring everything. And so, yeah, it's, adds an interesting dimension. All right. All right, well, now that I've depressed all of you, anything else I can do to improve your day? Yeah. Well, any other debugging stuff that you'd like to touch base on? Okay. Do you want to do any, we could end early. We could, if you want, I'm happy to give feedback on like your story directions, if you want to chat about that. What would you like?
For our group, I think like right now we have like the basic structure of like a lot of the data we want to look at, but we were considering adding something to like zoom in on one state and talk about sort of like urban rural divide and like income and maybe other things, just because like the best data we could find for these things like income and COVID were at the state level, but like we know that things vary pretty widely between like different spaces within the state. And so we have like this data set, I don't know, Ishi, I know you were just looking at it, that like has some districts, but also might be collapsing districts into like urban and rural categories. So we're not really sure if that like will give anything meaningful. Is that what you were just finding, Ishi, when you were looking at it?
Yeah. Because I was trying to like maybe join it with the vaccine data set for that state, and there's a lot more districts
Okay.
in the vaccine one. So maybe we just need to find like a different data set.
Yeah.
That could be effective if you could, yeah, I mean, you could treat it as a case study, like, so maybe, if you make some statement about why you're zooming into this particular state and like, is it representative of India as a whole? Is it, have they done a particularly good job of data collection or publishing data, et cetera? And then is it particularly populated, et cetera? And then, then zoom in and then you could, draw whatever conclusions. And then if you want, I mean, you could make the story just about that one state, and then that's a direction you could go in. Or if you want to talk about India as a whole, or even the world as a whole, you can, one state is not the entire world, and is not the entire country. So, just be careful about how you're framing your conclusions, but yeah, it's totally reasonable to like understand a problem by digging into a subset of the cases in more depth, and then, you know, just, you know, you want to communicate that you're zooming in or zooming out, and, you know, be careful about what you can and can't generalize.
Yeah. I don't know too much about like how representative it is or anything like that, but I think the way we would probably frame it is like we have this story about like different outcomes between the states, and then we could be like, okay, but like to complicate it further, we know this isn't like the full picture. So I'm not sure if we would like completely change the story to focus on the state or anything, because I agree that that would probably give off maybe some like potentially inaccurate representations of like the whole country. But I think they have decent data. We had this one data set that we were looking at, but then we did start to realize about the districts. So I think we'd probably have to like keep looking. But
I mean, the fact that one state doesn't mirror the entire country, like that's not a problem per se. It's just that you can't, like, you just can't then say the story is about an entire country when you're only looking at data from one state. But like, if you wanted to focus on one town or even one person, like that would be a totally fine thing to do. It's just that you can't say one person is the entire country either. So yeah, you know, it just changes how you frame the story, but it's not like it's bad to focus in on a, you know, data, you know, high resolution data. It's just that you just want to be clear about what you're doing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think with both of these stories, there's like a lot of potential to connect on an emotional level with your audience. And so like there are lots of strategies. So, you know, I think how can you, yeah, so like, can you relate this to, you know, these happenings to your, you know, audience's lives? I mean, you know, some of you mentioned you have family in India, so, and all of you are Dartmouth students, so obviously there's like connections to these stories, but like, you know, it's like there's the abstract, this is happening to like people, and then there's like, here's how it affects, like, in like there, it's like COVID cases going up, that's just a number. But if you can connect it to like, okay, here's like how it affects people's lives, and it's like, you know, you wanted to get this out of your college experience, or you like wanted to make life better for your family, and like, here's what you were hoping for, and here's what happened. And these, it's like, you're trying to, you know, make progress in this impossible situation. Like, you know, that feels like it can be more real if you can tell the personal story or the like human side of your story, versus, you know, if you just have a bunch of numbers, it can come off as like, yeah, I don't know, like, you know, it's a tricky balance, because it's like, to illustrate the scale, you need like the numbers to be big, but like one of those numbers is like you or a family member, and so like that's kind of where it becomes real, because it's so hard to picture just these like amazingly vast numbers. Like our brains are just like not calibrated to think on these scales, but you know, we can think of our own lives and our family members' lives and our friends' lives and that sort of thing. So, yeah. Sad kid. Sorry for the crying in the background. Perfectly fine. Okay. anything else any other guidance, or should we end now and we'll so if you do your stories for Sunday night, then we'll, Sunday at midnight, or, we'll talk about them on Monday. All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend. Good luck finishing up your stories, and looking forward to talking about them on Monday. Take care, everyone.